Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah. And be moi. How you doing? Me too. So, number 23rd. If I forget, let me wish you all a Merry Christmas. This will be my last show of the year. Just want to say to 2021, don't let the door hit you in the you-know-what as you exit. I found a little piece of good news. It ain't much. But I thought, how nice. And it has to do with the, New York Times book people deciding what were the greatest books of the year. And dang, if they didn't pick as one of the best art books of the year, a catalog that was put out by the Westmoreland Museum of American Art this year. Now, the catalog was a 240-page book that has a lot in it about a specific artist, a woman named who? I didn't ever hear of her. Her last name is Lee. Doris Lee. Anyway, they rave about it, and that's sort of surprising. I think of the Westmoreland Museum as a little of art, as a little teeny weeny out of the way place, and for them to have put together this that made the New York Times rave, I think that's pretty cool. So. Apparently, this woman artist was somewhat known in her life, but then became, not as well known. And don't know. The stuff, her artwork is still up and available. By the way, because the exhibit opened at the end of September, and I think it's still up for a bit. Just telling you, I don't know, nothing big. It's called Simple Pleasures: The Art of Doris Lee. And the chief art critic for the New York Times chose it and said it was one of her favorites of the year. There you go. It's a little thing. I know most of you don't give a damn, but I wanted to tell you. And then I have a question. I'm always stunned at the things that it turns out are perfectly legal. This has to do with taxation. In this case, property taxes, which, by the way, are in the news in Pittsburgh for a number of reasons, because the school district did increase property taxes by 3%? It amounts to $30 for every 100,000 of assessed value of your home. Talk about that at some other time. But this thing had been a story that I had pulled out of the paper, local paper, a while ago. And it just struck me as so wrong. And perhaps you read it, but it's about a woman, and this happens to a lot of people, apparently. This is a woman who bought a house in Munhall last year, so she could be closer to her aging parents. And she paid $310,000 for it. And after she had bought it, she finds out that Munhall is appealing the property assessment, which was $91,000. Now, as you know, property assessments are often much lower than the actual value of a home. I've never quite understood that either. But when Munhall did this, her assessed value, and they said her assessed value is, and I guess has become now, $271,300, almost as much as what she paid for it. $271,000 from $91,000. So when she bought the house, she assumed that the assessment was $91,000 and that her property tax would be based on that. And then she buys the house, and Munhall triples it, right? Triples it. And so her annual property tax bill went from $3,600 something to $11,000. And it turns out that this is called a Newcomers Tax. Beware of buying a house. A Newcomers Tax. And it's one of the few ways that municipalities, because they are reluctant to ever pass tax increases, so they wait for some unsuspecting soul to buy a house, and then they reassess, and then they get a windfall from that particular property owner. And they maintain this is one of the few tools they have to raise revenue. So it turns out that she is now paying, she and one other new homeowner on the same street are paying almost a quarter of all the taxes collected from the 32 homes on that street. So, how is that? She's paying 3 to 4 times more than most other homeowners, than her neighbors. Now, how is that? That just strikes me as so outrageous. And now her efforts, or if she would choose to try to sell the house, I mean, that becomes more difficult, obviously. Who wants to buy into that kind of a tax bill? I am always blown away by how government functions or doesn't. Just blown away by it. I mean, that is so obviously, outrageously unfair. It's like I feel about, and I think the Kellogg strike, which has, thank God, finally been settled. Often these strikes have a lot to do with companies wanting to create a 2-tier system so that the people who already are working there will continue to get, better wages than the new hires. Which, I mean, for people who are doing the exact same job, it strikes me as an outrage. And you can imagine that, you pay this guy this much for doing that, and you pay this guy less for doing that. And that doesn't create, morale difficulties. Unions are always fighting this stuff. I don't know. The older I get, the more I know I don't know. I don't know a damn thing. Which brings me to something Zach, one of our producers, told me not too long ago when we were talking about people being so extraordinarily stupid. I think we were talking about vaccinations and stuff. And after the show, he texted me and he said, your conversation with the last caller had me thinking of the Dunning-Kruger Effect, which of course I don't know about. And he goes on to say, it's a cognitive bias in which people believe that they're smarter and more capable than they are. Well, I got a feeling there's an awful lot of people that are suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. And he said this, it basically breaks down to this. They don't know enough to realize how much they don't know. So this is ignorance snowballing. And I think that the sign of a knowledgeable person or somebody who's trying to keep learning is someone who is humbled by how much there is out there to know and how little we know. So, and that got me into, I'm reading a book now. Forgive me, I'm going to read some of it to you. This author has been booked for the show in early January. Her name is Jessica Nordell. She's written a book called The End of Bias, A Beginning. And it's all about the science behind unconscious bias, which we all have. And the book is just fascinating. I mean, she's a great writer. But there was this one paragraph I read last night. I thought that is just so amazing. You know how we, Western culture, look down our noses so often at what we term primitive cultures, or we have other names for them, developing or third world, whatever. People who, like, obviously are not our equals. And the more you study other cultures, you so often find that they're in many ways smarter than us or more humane than us. I'll read this to you because she talks about how from the time a child is born, what is a baby doing? A baby's trying to make sense of what's going on, trying to understand this crazy place it finds itself. And one of the ways a child begins to do that, and this is maybe an older child, I don't know, 1 or 2, they begin to understand categories. They categorize so that they know that a cat is an animal, but a cat is not a dog. And a lot of little kids' books do this, pointing out the animals, the differences. And children, in starting to make sense of the world, begin to sort and categorize. We all did it. We all still do it. And it's a big part of how we navigate our world. But categorizing groups very quickly leads to what? Stereotyping groups. And stereotyping, as you know, leads. But there's no getting rid of categorizing. That's what we do. It makes sense that we do it. But it creates a kind of way of thinking and of networks in our brain chemistry that create what ends up essentially being unconscious biases. So the author talks about, for instance, let's go into this thing that I've had some trouble with, but nowhere near as much as some folks. The idea that Western culture decreed there were two genders. Correct? And they weren't the only culture to do it because, looked to be. There were those with penises and those that didn't have them. That was it. So there are two. But she points out that this idea of categorizing that the world is made up of men and women, boys and girls, is nowhere near universal. And in fact, it was a lot of Native American cultures that had much more complicated gender systems. And they have come to be called, there'd be men, there'd be women, and there'd be two-spirit people. A distinct third gender. I remember my brother who taught courses in primitive cultures, dispute settlement policies, how their judicial systems worked, how they came to the truth. And in researching these so-called primitive cultures, he came upon this fascinating thing that he had told me about a long time ago, that there were Native American tribes, exactly, that did not insist that people be either male or female. And they had no problem allowing a guy who sure looked like a guy to instead essentially present as a woman. And there was no judgment about it. They even had ways for people who were just generally they were contrarians. And I remember him saying that if somebody presented as a contrarian in some ways, then some tribes said, well, okay, but then you have to constantly be contrarian. So you have to, when you ride your horse, you sit facing its rear, or I don't know, you walk backwards, you do everything, in a contrary manner, and no one's going to laugh, and everyone's just going to say, oh, that's, so-and-so. If you think of, there was a Dustin Hoffman movie, Little Big Man. Do you remember that? Where I think as a child, he's captured by Native Americans and raised with them. And I believe I think he was a kind of contrarian Indian. I seem to recall something about that, and some of you with better memories can help me there. But I want to go back to this book because it fascinated me. So with these Native American cultures, these two-spirit people, the third gender, that was totally recognized. These individuals could take on roles that diverged from those dictated by their, visual sex. Two-spirit men might become weavers. Two-spirit women could become warriors. Nobody blinked. There's a culture in Indonesia, the Bugis or Bugis culture, where they had 5 genders. God bless them. They had biological males who occupy masculine roles, biological females who occupy female roles. Now, see, that's it. That's it for us up until very recently. And that's it for us, according to probably most Americans. Oh, I don't know. But this culture in Indonesia, the third classification is biological females who occupy masculine roles, and biological males who occupy feminine roles. So there's 4. And then we're up to 5, the 5th gender, whose sex was considered immaterial because these people were thought to transcend gender. And from them came their healers, their priests. In fact, in the indigenous cultures of Southeast Asia, in which God is not male and not female, but a unification of both genders, two-spirit people embodying both elements were seen as more obviously godlike. So, I mean, that's just an aside in her book, trying to explain how we make sense of things through categorization, and how our culture is so rigid. It is so rigid. And these things are in the bone for a lot of people. They can't, they're unwilling. I mean, because religion also, I think, has an awful lot to do with this. I knew, Ray, I'd hear from you. This is horseshit, he says. What gamete does the third sex produce? We have lost our minds. Now, I disagree. What these cultures are saying is it's not all about procreation. It's about a person's humanity and how they fit into a larger fabric. And some folks who look like they're guys don't think they're guys, don't feel like they're guys. She starts this book. I shouldn't give all this away with a scholar who was a scientist, and was female at a time when females were not thought to get into science too much. And this scientist, this woman, became really rather well known. People would come to study with her at her lab, was invited often to speak at conferences. But she had never felt like a girl, as a child ever. She was stuck, and she'd never heard of anything called transgender. But eventually she did. And at the age of 43, she was a neurobiologist. At the age of 43, she transitioned. And of course, she was very freaked about what her colleagues would think. And am I still here? What are you trying to call me? Am I still here? Yeah. And you know what happened to her? It took a little bit of time, but as she transitioned to he found that he was taken more seriously as a scientist. It didn't hurt his scientific career at all. All of a sudden, he was being listened to. He was invited to more conferences. He all of a sudden had authority he had never experienced before because he was no longer a woman. So here's a guy who, and there are now many amongst us, who have lived life knowing what it is to live as a woman and knowing then what it is to live as a man. And you could write, and I'm sure somebody has written a book about how many trans men are just blown away by all of a sudden the better service they get, all that kind of stuff, everything that comes with male privilege. On the other hand, trans women often get a very unhappy kind of introduction to what it is to present yourself as a female when you had been presenting as a male. So, I mean, she uses these stories just to talk about how the culture, we're just suffused with these certain biases that have a lot to do with how we are seen, with what becomes available to us, with how we end up seeing ourselves. And man, it's fascinating stuff. All of us have tons of unconscious bias. We have to, because it's how we've made our way. Ed writes about the woman who bought the house in Munhall. Hey, it's called gentrification because her attorney or realtor didn't alert her to perform a due diligence process. Well, how do you know what the borough's going to do? Oh, then maybe you'd ask them before you bought. She didn't realize that she was telling her new borough that she thinks the property is worth the price she paid when buying it. But that's all over I bought my house and, for well over the assessed value. And my assessment hasn't risen that much. Now, I have the good fortune to have probably the least expensive house on my street. I'm surrounded by much bigger houses. I got a little one. But yeah, when the houses on my street start selling or they renovate, that is going to raise my value, right? So and Ed says she has begun what will most likely turn into a burden for all the homeowners in her area when the next county-wide assessment happens, because they'll use her house, right? Yeah, but they don't do county-wide assessments. They don't. If they did countywide assessments, this kind of one person getting stuck wouldn't happen. Everyone would be treated fairly. And politicians don't want to do reassessments because people get pissed off, of course. So rather than deal with that, you just take on one poor soul at a time, right? I don't know. It's bull. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, from a fairness standpoint. I don't understand anything anymore. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a caller? Forgive me. Hello? You still there? Okay. I don't blame you.
Hello?
Oh, you are? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, you are there. Okay. Hello. Yeah, I can.
Okay. Hey, maybe they ought to do means testing. You ever think of that? Yeah, we
for property. No, we can't go there.
I mean, how much money you make, what's your income?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the logical thing to go, but people that have big paying jobs living in these big mansions, they don't want to pay more, so you know how that goes. But,
well, I think what has to happen is all of these tax-free properties, all of the schools and the churches and the hospitals have got to be taxed.
That's where the money came from before, and it worked out great.
Yeah.
The mills paid it. The mills were keeping the like here in Beaver County, that's what kept our city going and everything. It's just crazy. But what I wanted to talk about is, I don't know if it was last week or this week, you were talking about that bill there, that Build Back Better bill, and I don't know if they're going to pass it or not. I think they'll get a watered-down version, as they always do. But anyway, I think the biggest thing that Democrats do is they always have to have another program. They got to add another program. When we have programs in place right now, welfare, food stamps, energy assistance, all kind of things that help working families. So all they need to do is lower the amount of money or raise it up to like you could qualify. But they make it so far down there, not all these people that they're upper, I don't even want to call them middle class, but it's the money that you got to make is like nothing hardly. If they'd raise that up, there's some struggling families in that middle. I can't explain.
Right.
And they don't do that.
Well, that's what the but see, in order to raise that limit, you'd go into the same kind of stalemate situation because of the Republicans. They won't raise it.
Yeah, they won't.
So you just can't get stuff done.
They don't want to tax the rich, so that's out.
No, and they love poor people. They love poor people to stay poor and then blame them for being poor. I don't know.
In this country, too, it gets me. They think just because you don't make a lot of money, it's your fault, and you didn't do something right. You didn't go to school. I hate to tell them, a lot of people got degrees, they got skills. They can't find a job that pays. Or like a carpenter, you could find two jobs as a carpenter, one making this kind of money and the other one make jack shit. It's just how it is. It's our financial. It's not the policies always. It's our system. The system doesn't work. The free enterprise does not work. It does not work for all people.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't work for a ton of people. That's right.
Yeah,
it's a brutal system. Yeah.
And that's the whole problem.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Sorry you had to wait so long. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Bye. And just a few odds and ends I have here, but hang on. Excuse me. Got to remind myself. I'm seeing pictures now of National Guard people working in hospitals and nursing homes. And this is happening in a number of states. The president has said he's going to, Had about 1,000 military people to deploy, medical military to deploy. And here's the thing. What's wrong with this picture? I mean, if we have to deploy military to support a basic thing like health care, hospitals, nursing homes, then maybe before you pass the next huge military bill, you might want to say, you know what? Maybe we should take some of that away and give it to health care. Are we spending, are our budget priorities a little weird? Because we got to look at where the challenges are to our people. And I want to say another piece of good news is that the student loan pause in payments has been kicked up to the spring, and that also is a sign of a government that isn't functioning anymore. If you can keep doing that, kicking the can up the street, then kick it all the way. Just stop. Just stop. I've seen people saying one thing that would make sense is at least wipe out the student debt of all of these poor healthcare workers. Bang, just like that. And here's something I also saw. A lot of this I see on Twitter. It touches a nerve. But somebody writes that a friend, a teacher friend, told him that the school the teacher is in is going to be practicing what's called an adjusted active shooter drill today. Now, okay, so you know why it's being adjusted? Because you don't want the kids huddled too closely together under their desks that they spread COVID. But you want them under the desks so they don't get killed by an active shooter. And I'm asking you to imagine being a child. Trying to make sense, again, of this world. I'm so old that I remember huddling under my desk in the 1950s. And I was huddling under my desk so I would be ready when the Russians dropped an atomic bomb on us. Now, of course, the absurdity of that was that hiding under the desks would have absolutely done us no good whatsoever. So again, a lot of what happens is like taking your shoes off at the TSA and all that crap with TSA. It's performative. It's government insisting on looking as if they're keeping you safe, when really what they're doing is making you a frigging wreck. All right, well, if this life is becoming too much for some of you, the good news is I'm trying to focus on good news, and I'm trying to see how we can sometimes turn things that look like bad news into good news. And so, for those of you who are thinking, I can't take this any longer, you'll be glad to know that the Centers for Disease Control says that life expectancy in the United States has dropped almost by 2 years in just the last 2 years. So, good. It says life expectancy is now, they didn't break this down for men and women, but is now pretty much 77, which means I'm almost dead. That is the largest single drop. Oh, that's just in 1 year. I'm sorry. The largest single drop in 75 years. And of course, it's because of COVID. But you see, the way you can make something positive rather than negative. There was a headline in the New York Times today, above the fold, right there on the big top. Despite Biden's vow, tests weeks away. Well, yeah, that's sticking it to Biden. But again, when there's so much negativity and everybody, why can't you just say tests are on the way? The Post-Gazette, I think it was, had a headline that was it's on the front page. It's, I think, in the right hand bottom, and it's a 3-tier headline. I mean, it's 3 lines, and I don't have it in front of me, but it said the first thing you see is it says Biden shot. Well, hell, I mean, first of all, that's what I saw. I saw Biden shot, and that's the kind of thing that stops you in your tracks. But it was Biden shot, and the second line, mandate. I don't know, like, to be heard by this court. I don't know what it was, but that is not a good headline when it doesn't fit right, because what everybody sees is Biden shot. It turns out shot, as I saw it, was not it was a adjective, not a verb. Ed writes again, hello again. I don't think the real estate tax makes any sense the way they're set up. No, they make 0 sense. It is currently set up, he says, as a social segregation program to get rid of people who can't afford new higher real estate taxes, even though they have lived in their homes for years and years. I've lived in my house, he says, for almost 50 years, and now with current development and building of $500,000 to multi-million-dollar homes in my once rural farmland area, my taxes have skyrocketed. Basing schools on real estate taxes is a large part of the problem. Absolutely true. We talked about this before. The fact that the state of Pennsylvania is among the absolute bottom of all the states in how much they support school districts, it's an outrage. I mean, it's an outrage. There's no way somebody could argue for property taxes being a smart way to fund education. I'd love to hear the person make the argument, because it sets up the winners continue to be winners, and it sets up the poor to continue to be losers. It's an outrage. Oh, God, guys. All right, what else I got for you here? I've been meaning to talk about this for some time, and I keep forgetting. But when I'm out walking my dog at night, when it's dark, which is about, 3 o'clock in the afternoon now, when it's pitch dark, and so I'm walking on the sidewalk, and cars are on the street, and that's when they're not on the sidewalk, which they often do. In my neighborhood, somehow someone got the idea that sidewalks are to park on. Don't get me started. But here's what I want to say. When a car, let's say, crests a hill, and believe me, there's a lot of hills when I'm walking my dog. A car at night crests the hill, and I get hit by a blinding light. What the hell has happened to headlights? And because so many of them, and even when you're driving in a car, if you drive a normal car as opposed to the cars that seemingly most people drive nowadays, these big effing SUVs. But if you drive just a, lower to the ground sedan, those SUV headlights are blinding people. And if the car's behind you with them, they still blind you because they shine into your mirrors and you can't see. What the hell? I mean, seriously, it's as blinding as much as, when the sun is setting and you're on the parkway driving west and you get a full sun blast in your eyes and you really can't see a damn thing. Car headlights, whatever they've done to them, they are dangerous now. Because if you think about it, because SUVs are so much higher, that places their headlights at eye level for anyone who's driving a real car. And you blind us. You get blinded from behind. You get blinded from cars that are coming towards you. What are these, LED lights? What's happened? Halogen? I don't know. I've never understood anything that's going on with lights. Remember when you could... I don't know. But they are too bright. Can't just be because I'm an old person. Is it? Because when you get older, clearly your eyes don't handle night, darkness as well. But, geez, I don't understand how that doesn't blind absolutely everybody. Everybody. I read a disquieting little piece in the Washington Post today I'd like to share with you. You want me to? But as I've said, the attempted coup that we first saw on January 6th is continuing apace. And the Washington Post piece says that election officials all over this country are still facing a constant and growing, that's the scary part, growing barrage of angry citizens claiming that the vote was not secure and certain things need to be investigated or decertified. It turns out that this is driven by well-funded Trumpsters. And they go in to state officials and they're still doing it. They want to inspect machines. They want audits conducted. And then they get their, their brilliant grassroots folks behind him, all of whom believe that Joe Biden did not win the election. And this is not just going in in the 6 states like, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where Trump, and Arizona, where Trump sought to overturn the outcome. It's even going on in like totally red places like Wyoming and Idaho that totally went for Trump. And yet the election officials are being hounded. There's one guy I want to tell you about. By the way, the My Pillow jerk is funding a lot of this. He has said he has spent $25 million. But it's a guy who works with him, Douglas Frank, who is seriously dangerous. He's a math and science teacher in Ohio, and he claims to have discovered secret algorithms that were used to rig the 2020 election. And they, in this article, detail some of what this guy has been up to. And it's chilling. He met for more than 2 hours in May with the senior staff of the Ohio Secretary of State. These are other Republicans, in which totally presenting bogus lunatic claims that the voting machines had been hacked. And he warned, these are other Republicans he's threatening. He warned them that he planned to pursue multiple legal actions and that there would be consequences if the Ohio Secretary of State did not cooperate. Somebody recorded a meeting and listened to some of what he was saying to the Secretary of State who oversees the election. I'm warning you that I've been going around the country and we're starting lawsuits everywhere. And I want you guys to be allies, not opponents. I want to be on your team, but I'm warning you. Well, after that meeting, Ohio Secretary of State, again, a Republican, posted a video on Facebook saying that under state law, no voting machines are connected to any network. And he pushed back. These people just keep coming. And all kinds of jurisdictions are spending tons of time now and money not doing what we elect them to do, but in dealing with this. This same guy, Frank, has been calling for firing squads. Yeah. For those guilty of treason, he says. And in one post, he said, history will not look kindly on state officials who turned a blind eye to the massive election fraud that took place in 2020. He's threatened the Michigan Secretary of State, a Democrat. He said she should face a jury capable of dispensing capital punishment. This continued attack and assault on our election officials is part of the coup that is still ongoing. Here's this same guy again. And believe me, I'm telling you, he's got millions behind him, millions of dollars, millions of people. He said after the Nuremberg trials, there were hangings and firing squads. I firmly believe these elections are not fair and free. They are being manipulated. And he considers that treason, yeah, and he wants people killed. He spoke at a Trump rally and did, in fact, talk to the former president and a number of his advisors. So these are the guys that, I mean, this is just ongoing. I want you to know. We think this stuff isn't happening. It's happening. There's people who are doing this 24/7. And the people who are on the receiving end of these threats you read this and you start going insane. I mean, even the Republican, the RNC has said of this guy, his criticisms are reckless and completely false. But it just keeps coming. And we now have seen that this constant, nonstop tsunami of false information eventually this is a very long article, and it will keep you from sleeping. Just saying. I thought there was one more thing like that I had for you. Want to bring it in. Oh, here, I came across this. This was just in today's paper. A county in Georgia, which is has a large black population, is going to close 6 of its 7 polling sites for the midterms. And that is a decision made after these Trumpers took over the local election board and purged it of all the Democrats, which has been going on county by county by county all over the place, including in Pennsylvania, as I pointed out. Can you imagine, before the midterms, they're going to close 6 out of 7 polling places? What could they possibly say was the reason? That's what's so amazing about this. The right out, the transparency, the right out there. Even Trump the other day said something like, if that voting rights bill passes, Republicans will never win an election again. So there it is. They know that if Americans are allowed to vote, they will lose. And so, they are openly in front of us rigging the system. And of course, saying the system is already rigged, which it is not. They will now rig it, as they are. I'm not sure what it is we're supposed to do, but I know we're not supposed to not pay attention. That I know. Well, guys, listen, I'll see you in the new year. As I told you before, I'm taking next week off. And I hope when next I see you, I'm not reporting a breakthrough COVID case. I've been reading some frightening things about how it impacts women exactly my age. As these breakthrough cases for fully vaccinated and boosted people are frightening, and some are ending in death. Just want to say, Merry Christmas. Really, take care of yourselves, okay? Please. These are horrible times. Extract what joy you can. And I'll see you in the new year. Saying Happy New Year seems such an absurd salutation to me. Let's say happier, healthier New Year.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.